3 people were arrested today in London accused of spying for the Russians. Our Russian and Chinese operatives are using sex warfare to seduce Silicon Valley executives and steal secrets.
The oldest trick in the book, isn't it? And I mean, I'm from California, and so this is not the first time that we're hearing of this sort of honeypot technique.
Then you've got to be a little bit suspicious. As the old adage goes, Harry, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
We're letting our enemies into our minds. Tonight, when does a Cold War get hot? It's already happening in our streets, in our companies, and even our phones. Another 3 people were arrested today in London accused of spying for the Russians. Spooks say it's yet more foreign proxies recruited across the West. Meanwhile, Russian and Chinese operatives are using sex warfare to seduce Silicon Valley executives and steal secrets. That racket is apparently costing America up to £600 billion a year. Dollars, rather, given we're in America. From London to Silicon Valley, we're being attacked from the shadows and, it seems, in the sheets. But are our enemies running rings round us? Joining us tonight is Rebekah Zjelko, DC reporter for The Blaze, who's in the studio with us. Rebekah, our enemies are basically taking the mickey, aren't they? Are we woefully ignorant of what's going on?
I like to say that I'm woefully ignorant of most things going on in the world, but I don't think this is any exception. And I mean, for most people, it can be something as slick or as unnoticeable as, technology, something that even though I'm Gen Z, it kind of goes over my head. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, things were happening in my phone or whatever.
And then there's just the good old-fashioned honey traps, right? I mean, the Silicon Valley sex targeting. I mean, presume that's going to be a lot of guys as well as girls targeting Silicon Valley executives. But that's just good old-fashioned spying.
It's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? And I mean, I'm from California, and so this is not the first time that we're hearing of this sort of honeypot technique. Might I remind our viewers about one Eric Swalwell of California, but that's a different story.
Indeed. Well, joining us down the line from London is Will Geddes, a security expert. Will, are you there? How are you?
I am here, Harry.
Welcome back to the show. We're just talking about the oldest trick in the book, right?
Oh, yes, since the days of Mata Hari, Harry. Honey trapping has been a favorite very much of the Chinese, but the Russians have adopted this strategy as well. And we're seeing it on both sides of the fence in terms of genders. And it's one of those risks which potentially young, lonely, wealthy executives are prone to, whether that be at home or whether it be when they're traveling overseas. But it's a very effective tactic, and I deal with quite a few of the blackmails that quite often will follow.
So talk me through what's happening in London today. Another 3 people have been arrested for aiding and abetting, it seems, foreign power, Russia being namely the enemy in question. We're seeing this more and more and more. Is it a dramatic increase in espionage, or are we just getting better at spotting it?
Well, we've seen an increase, Harry, of about 3 times in the last couple of years in the espionage activities. And this is right across the kinetic spectrum. So everything from the honey traps, as you mentioned, through to sabotage, to surveillance, to assassinations. And we've certainly heard of enough individuals that are not friends of Putin, allegedly, that have taken a bit of a swallow dive off the top of their very prestigious apartments. So again, these acts are quite often being undertaken by operatives, one would allege from the GRU unit, which is their sort of clandestine arm of the FSB, or the KGB as they were once known, who will conduct surveillance, but they'll also look at individuals to recruit, and whether that be by coherence or collaboration through financial incentive, or whether it be through blackmail, to then provide what I call a puddle jump, which is moving from one prospect to the next and moving their way up the chain. And we've seen a lot of this happening.
Look, we've seen chemical weapons attacks, arguably by the GRU. It was identified as their operatives that attacked Salisbury back in 2018, I believe it was. We've seen spies poisoned on the streets of London, murdered in American cities, shot in Germany. The Russians are running rings around us, aren't they?
They are running rings around us, Harry, and also the spread of targets which they're looking to aim at is pretty broad as well. There was a list of 21 individuals named on what they call the stop list from Russia, which is issued by their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I had the prestige of being actually named on that list myself. But you look at individuals that are right across the private sector like me, to people in the media, to people who are not considered to be friends of Russia, that perhaps maybe, and I'm excluding myself, but perhaps have influence, obviously, on a broader section. They're running a very multi-platformed strategy to try and ensure that they are furthering their message and skewing any other counter message.
I mean, it seems to me that governments across the West are very keen and very able and very willing to openly blame the Russians, to publish their names when they're arrested and charged and put on trial, kicking out hundreds of diplomats over the years for espionage just in the last decade. I can think of countless times. When the Russians do it, it's called out. When the Chinese do it, it's sort of hush-hush. It's let's not upset them. Let's not upset our trade deficits. Let's collapse a spy trial, as we've discussed before, you and I. How bad is, compared to the Russians, how bad are the Chinese? And are we hearing, presumably not, quite the level of infiltration and penetration that they've achieved across the West?
All your points there are incredibly valid.
You can come back again, Will. That's what we like to hear.
And I would say the best way to describe the difference in the tradecraft between the Russians and the Chinese is the Russians use a sledgehammer to achieve their aim in many regards, whether it be cyber, whether it be sabotage, whether it be kidnapping, assassination, poisoning, or otherwise. And then you look at the Chinese, and the Chinese are far more clandestine. They're very clever about inveigling their ways into commerce, in technology, into business, into various different ways. And they'll do it very, very, very subtly. We've got to remember Sun Tzu came from China, and The Art of War, which was written 800 years BC or thereabouts. They've been working on very, very skillful strategies to try and achieve their aims. And we're seeing evidence of it. Although, to be absolutely honest, much of it's going beneath the surface, Harry, and very little of it's actually being detected until it's too late.
Will Geddes, stay there. We're going to bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, YouTube star extraordinaire. Good evening, Colonel. Welcome back to the show. Just discussing there with Will the sledgehammer of the Russians and the subtlety of the Chinese. Who do you think is the bigger threat to the West?
Well, I actually I'm part of that group that doesn't think either one of them need to be a threat. They're both competitors, and I think that we make them more of an enemy than we do of a competitor, somebody that we can ever work with, because we only seem to want to find ways to push them down and to cut their feet out from under them, et cetera, instead of even looking for ways to win-win, which we used to do in the past. So right now, they're both. If you want to make them an enemy, they can be a bad enemy, and it can be a problem in either direction. And I think that seems to be the path we've chosen, and I think that we're getting, in large part, exactly what we're asking for.
Well, it talks about hostile states and state-backed actors, and we could talk to the cows come home about the long history of espionage between countries. Interesting stories around today about the level of espionage in the private sector and companies targeting each other. Colonel, talk us through, is this entire world that we're not really, it's very murky. Obviously, technology-based companies themselves are probably spying on each other, but then are they also open to states and other, foreign companies infiltrating them?
Without question, they are. That's certainly a case that, you can't look any further than my own country. Our CIA in the past has done exactly that. We've actually physically used front companies to do kinds of espionage all over the planet. So unfortunately, our hands are not clean, and you can definitely count on the fact that both Russia and China and really all kinds of states, and even the UK, I can even say that's going on all over the place over there as well. It's just tradecraft. It's what we're all doing on each other. The question is, what's going to be the most effective and what produces the best outcomes for our side? Because you don't want to get into a place where all you're doing is harming the other side, because then that's going to have blowback on yourself. You want to be aware of what's going on, and especially identify anything untoward that's happening towards you, or if they're stealing your intellectual property, you want to put the kibosh on that right away. But let's also simultaneously look for ways to cooperate and to reduce the reason why they would want to do some of those things, and to try and to get places where we can get cooperation where we can and resist where we must.
Will Geddes, you're nodding along there. You advise companies, you advise business people, you advise governments on how to avoid this stuff. Is it too good to be true often in this case? What would you be advising technology firms right now if they bumped into a pretty man or a lady in a bar?
Well, Harry, I couldn't agree with the Lieutenant Colonel more in terms of the points that he raised. I think yes, if you're, I think you've got to look at your own stock, Harry, and you've got to measure it against whoever might approach you. And if it's someone who's especially pretty or handsome, then you've got to be a little bit suspicious. As the old adage goes, Harry, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
What keeps you up at night, though, Will Geddes? What's the one thing that is not getting enough attention at the moment? What's the one sort of angle or piece of tradecraft or spycraft that we seem so most blind to?
Okay, I would say probably, and this applies from both sides of the pond, you know, our dear friends in the United States and also here in the United Kingdom, it's political influence. There are two aspects, really, and that's firstly by individuals, low-level staffers that are being recruited to affect introductions, possibly even to put their seniors or contacts into compromising positions. And we know this is happening very, very regularly with individuals that do have influence, whether it be in Congress, Senate, or it's in Parliament here in the United Kingdom. The second thing is social media. It is a bane of our lives. And China, we know, are using a lot of bot farms to try and propel certain messages, obviously, and inject into the youth's minds particular political persuasions and agendas. And I think and there's a lot of confusion that's going on. And I think that's only evidence. Spend one day on social media, you'll see so many conflicting messages. And therefore, I think the big data companies, the Metas of this world, the Googles of this world, have to be very cautious with their algorithms and their management of this data.
Colonel, you're nodding along there. We've been taken for mugs, really, aren't we? We're literally making it easier for our opponents or our enemies, or as you say, our competitors, to run rings down us by, giving them, we're all carrying one of these. We spend 11 hours a day on it, some of us. We are letting our enemies into our minds.
Well, we are. I mean, there's no two ways around it. That's exactly what is happening. And we want to say that we're going to be more careful. But I mean, I'm talking to you on my phone right here in Boston. So I'm sure that somebody, if they want to, can walk in and get hold of it. But it becomes such an integral part of our normal life that you just can't turn it off. So that you're going to have to do what you can to find, protections and economic or electronic protection measures or whatever, and be careful what you're doing and be careful what you put on the thing too. That's also careful. But one of the other things I would add to what your other excellent guest there just said is that don't overestimate your ability to figure stuff out and to know you're smarter than the other guys, and don't underestimate the other side either. Both of those, I think, add to the problems and make it more difficult for us to actually keep ourselves safe.
Colonel, while I've got you, it's a slightly different topic, but I know we had a long discussion last week about what is going on in Latin America. You were cautioning the Pentagon and the White House against further involvement. Donald Trump is making some noises tonight that we could see some land action in Venezuela tonight. The air defences in Caracas are on high alert for sure. All sorts of mysterious activity going on over the Caribbean tonight. Can I get your response to that and anything you're hearing?
Huge problem, huge mistake. I mean, I actually had on my show earlier just today, I talked about how 14% of the U.S. Navy fleet has gone in there into the region. We've accelerated our amount of air power, sea power, troops that are in the ground, Marines, et cetera. There is nothing good to get here. Whatever they're saying about this is about, keeping drugs out of America, that's BS. I'm sorry. Just going to call that straight out. It's not. Venezuela is like number 20th on the list. And if you're bypassing everybody above, then that's not your reason. The fact that you've allowed the CIA to go in there and to conduct operations on the ground, and now apparently we're talking even more so. It's supposed to be against the U.S. law and against the U.S. Constitution for the President of the United States, any man, whoever's holding that job, to take the U.S. forces into lethal combat operations against another country. He's already done it with Iran. Nobody said anything about it. And now that you keep doing it, and now that it looks like he's using it as a plaything for something else, there is nothing. I'll just categorically say this. There is nothing in American national security interests that validates doing this and going into military conflict in this country, in Venezuela or Colombia, if he thinks he's going to go there later. All we're doing is stirring up a hornet's nest. And I'm telling you, if you think you're going against the cartels, picking a fight with the cartels has not worked well for other governments in the region, and we're not impervious to that either. Don't pick a fight we can't win, and don't start a fight that we shouldn't even engage in. I pray to God that it doesn't happen, but as you say, there's a risk of that.
But I mean, these extraordinary images we're seeing in the last few days. Submarines, these aren't fishing boats that are getting caught up in this. It's like actual submarines being used to shift over drugs. We've had senators and Congress people on this show, throughout the last week, all saying that they believe there is a legal basis for what the president is doing, what the commander-in-chief is doing, and they've been briefed privately about the security threat. But it is your understanding that this remains illegal conflict?
It is illegal. I don't care what they're saying. It's self-evident. The Constitution is clear. The 1973 War Powers is clear. There is no legal justification. Even when you want to say that there has been in the past, there's been a UNSC resolution, something that authorizes international lethal operations, and there is nothing like that. And we're not even being told what the intelligence is. We are told, just trust me, we know all the details here, but we're not sharing any of them with you. If you're going to take America into war, and especially if you're talking about the government and the military of Venezuela, not just some drug boat, but the country, that requires a that requires a declaration of war or an authorization by the Congress, neither of which is even on the table right now. So I would sternly disagree with anybody who says that. And again, there is no security issues that would require the use of force, which leaves us all to wonder, what is this really about? And I don't have an answer for that one.
Colonel, thank you for joining us tonight. Final thought from Will Geddes, if he's still with us, I believe he is. Will, with the greatest respect to our American friends, they don't have the best track record when it comes to intervening in South America. Do you share the Colonel's concerns there that, Trump is possibly biting off more than he can chew?
Yes, I'd completely agree with the Lieutenant Colonel. British Special Forces have operated down in the region extensively with the counter-narco teams, members of both the SAS and the SPIES. They've been very successful in a support capacity. For there to be a direct action by either US forces or UK forces, for that matter, as an ally, I think, again, could be biting off more than could be chewed. I think we would end up in possibly, and I mean, this may be a terrible analogy, but almost like an Afghanistan conflict. It needs to be directed mainly by intelligence and special forces in a very precision striking type of operation if they want to take out some of the channeling of drugs. But like the Lieutenant Colonel said, they are only one entity on the list of those that are involved in importing drugs, not only into the United States, but elsewhere.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Both repeat guests on Harry Cole Saves the West, and come back and see us again soon. Lots to chew over there with Rebekah from The Blaze. Rebekah, I mean, let's go back. Let's just rewind. We're going to come to Venezuela, and we're going to come to drugs, and we're going to come to bombings and fishing boats and submarines in a sec. But let's go back to the spying. Every time this sort of blows up, we get more stories, and as our guest was saying there, it's clearly well known what everyone's up to, from the Chinese to the Iranians to the Russians. Why do politicians always act like there's some great surprise to this? And are they slightly are they in denial, or are they just taking us for mugs?
I do think it is a bit rich to pretend like, this wasn't on anybody's radar.
Yeah.
I mean, TikTok comes to mind. As an avid user of TikTok, I'm not going to pretend to be all high and mighty over here.
Yeah.
But that one was a pretty obvious one. And even that, I mean, that's still kind of an ongoing conversation. The fact that there is such a grave national security threat, and it's been there since 2019 or whenever the app was founded. The fact that it's taken so long to actually do anything about it, I think, is really telling. I think a lot of it, honestly, is just true Washington fashion. They're just kind of dragging their feet to actually accomplish anything.
Is it that no one kind of wants to, admit how bad it is? Or are they being deliberately deceptive, or are actually they just being foolish?
I think I don't think I would say it's deliberate deception. I think it's more so I think there's an embarrassing element about being the greatest country, well, no offense, on the planet. And that's an argument we can have another day. But being one of the greatest countries in the world and still, having soft spots and still being vulnerable, I think that's a component. But I also think that it's just good old-fashioned bureaucracy in a lot of cases.
Let's talk about Venezuela, which is obviously, I mean, we don't quite know what's going on. There is all sorts of activity above the Caribbean tonight. Could be a dress rehearsal, could be a strike on Venezuela. The air defences are up, and as I said, in Caracas. Let's talk about the politics of this. The legal argument we've had with the Colonel there. How's the politics of this? Is this a president that's overstepping the mark? Does he have the right as the commander-in-chief to do what the hell he wants? And as the self-proclaimed president of peace, how wise is it, and how much support would he have from his own side in engaging in a potentially Afghan-like conflict, as Will Geddes said there, in South America?
I think that's what people are really weary about, is that and when I say we, I don't just mean Republicans or Trump voters. I think Americans in general are extremely weary and cautious when they see the state sort of start to meddle in foreign affairs. I think we saw a lot of the similar critiques emerge earlier in the summer when President Trump struck Iran. Everyone was kind of...
It worked though, right? I mean,
absolutely. No, and
short, sharp shock, no more nukes.
No doubt there. But there was that fear that it was going to pull us into something that we just couldn't get out of. And so, although there is obviously this ongoing legal conversation with the Rand Paul fans and then, of course, the more MAGA types, I do think that there is a tension there. There's a fear that we're going to get caught up in something that we just can't get out of. And so I think he should be cautious, but we also saw him pull off the Iran strike.
How popular is it, though? I mean, obviously, the drugs, parents, voters, Americans, deeply concerned about the drugs flowing into America through the southern border. This strikes me as something that could be quite, electorally, quite popular, right?
I don't think it's, I think it's popular to actually
try and do something. I think someone's doing something about it. Right?
Exactly. I don't think it's necessarily unpopular to try and do something about the cartels. I think the fear is, again, getting entangled with a foreign country, and I think also the severity of striking cartels or, they are cartels. I think some people are trying to say they're fishermen.
You don't normally see fishermen in submarines.
I'm not an outdoorsman, but I have not heard of that fishing technique before. But again, I do think that there's some caution there that should actually be paid attention to.
And we talk about the sort of electoral coalition, but within the White House, within the government, how much unity is on this? Because obviously J.D. Vance, Vice President, let it be known, he had his issues over striking on Iran. He was desperate to, he's very, very sort of well known as sort of the more isolationist wing of this administration. Is it all harmony behind the scenes? Is it, does Trump have the support of his closest colleagues on this?
It seems like he does. I mean, at least publicly, there have been times where, people like Senator Rand Paul have come out and heavily criticized the president. And
he does that a lot anyway, right?
That's kind of his thing. That's sort of what he's known for.
He was the only senator not invited to the barbecue,
and, that wasn't the first time that happened. And I'm starting to think that he's just okay with that. He's made peace with that. But, as you mentioned, some of Trump's closest allies in the administration have always come to his defense. And so we can at the very least say that outwardly, J.D. Vance seems to be sort of a moderator, a mediating force between the isolationists and people who might be more
And the president would argue that protecting American children and young people and citizens from drugs is America first. America first doesn't mean America, completely isolated. It means putting American interests first. Do you think he's making that argument well enough in 10 seconds? No pressure.
I think he's doing it the best that he can, and we'll have to see how it transpires over the next few weeks.